Hey guys, it's Blue, and I'm really excited to show you guys our Duelist Kingdom Kaiba deck profile. So, Duelist Kingdom is something, again, we know you guys have been asking for a while. It was the first, anime, um, we really saw. Despite that, it's something that we, up until this point, have not focused on as much, but we definitely plan to do it at some point. Now is the time, and we still, have a couple more decks we'd like to make in the future. So this isn't all of them. This is what we're pushing out right now, just a couple decks, but mostly main characters. And so the Kaiba's deck, you know, similar to Yugi, but more so than Yugi. His deck from Duelist Kingdom, a lot of the cards were staples that followed him throughout the rest of the series. Unlike Yugi, he really took only a couple cards. Kaiba took plenty of cards that, make an appearance in the next season or, story arc afterwards. Like a lot of these Duelist Kingdom decks we have now, most of the deck consists of duplicates. Because Kaiba didn't play enough cards, and the cards that are printed, that, to give him really a one of each copy deck, like Yugi. So between, all the duels we saw of Kaiba, his first duel against Yugi, and then the few times, but consistently, that we saw him play in later Duelist Kingdom. So we built his deck, and because it's so many duplicates, the deck for the most part still maintains a nice harmony, a nice like 1-to-1 ratio, because there still is for the most part, a 1-to-1 ratio of each card. The exception of the cards that there's 3 of, and cards that there's 1 of. But otherwise, the deck has a nice flow to it. It does seem to play really well. It's a lot of fun because it has a lot of classic Kaiba cards we don't see come back. So I'm going to start this, and let's go through the memories of Kaiba from Duelist Kingdom. First up is 2 Battle Locks. So, we've seen it at this point plenty of times in Kaiba decks. Except this deck does have his fusion, which is, probably the only time we really see it. Next up is, of course, Kaiba's 3 signature Blue Eyes White Dragons. And again, being Duelist Kingdom, you don't have to tribute to summon these. So they are way more lethal because you can just play them. No 2 tributes required, which is always what holds us back in playing later anime duels where you need 2 tributes. 2 Hitatsumi Giant. Again, another one of those cards we see come back in multiple Kaiba decks. It's it doesn't really do much. It's not super strong, but it's kind of like, Kaiba. The Judge Man. We went with 1 copy just, because it's the strongest normal monster in his deck, or monster, besides Blue Eyes. So I'm going to cut that down to 1. And the fact that we do see it again later, we wanted to make sure we had duplicates of a lot of the newer monsters, but also some of the mid-range monsters as well, like the next card, which is 2 La Jin, the Mystic Genie Lamp. And of course, this deck, as you'll see later, has Ancient Lamp. Of course, the La Jin Ancient Lamp combo we all love so much because genies and lamps. It's like Aladdin. Going back to Battle Locks, here's his buddy we really don't see much after this season. Mystic Horseman, the 2 of them making Rabid Horseman fusion. Next up, Rude Kaiser. Okay, so going back to the olden days, 1800 attack, 1600 defense, warranted to be 5 stars. Nowadays, that's nothing. That'd be 4 stars, no question. But again, the way old days of Yu-Gi-Oh, this was considered like a super strong monster, but aside from that, I think it's actually really cool. I've always loved the artwork personally on Rude Kaiser. Green lizard, a little bit of blue armor, a little bit of silver, and 2 blades on his wrists. So it's a card I've always been a fan of, so I'm happy to see it in Kaiba's deck so we can actually play with that old school throwback. Alright, another not new card really is Ryukishin Powered. So again, one of Kaiba's cards comes back, his Dark Fiend theme that he plays with a bit. How can we forget the oh so lovable Saggy the Dark Clown? So without Shrink, Saggy is Kaiba's only crush card target in this deck, which is why it was important for us to use 2 Saggys. Saggy's iconic Kaiba. It's one of those monsters that just screams Kaiba. It was always his thing. So we want to make sure, of course, there was two, especially a health crush card, of which we have wisely limited to one. But other than that, Saggy the Dark Clown. Classic Kaiba. And that 1500 defense is not too terrible. And the last normal monster is the Mighty Sword Stalker. So 2000 attack, 1600 defense. Fun fact, apparently it was kind of an effect monster in the anime that it could gain 20% of its attack points if there was a monster in the graveyard, so it would gain from a fallen teammate. So it ended up with 2400 attack. As you can see, we have not put an errata sticker on this, so we do not really care to play with that. There was so much in Duelist Kingdom, and if we started at one thing, you know, it'd be kind of hit and miss of where do we stop. So we maybe made a couple tweaks here and there, but for the most part, we're really not messing with the Duelist Kingdom dynamic. We're just gonna leave this as a normal monster, 2000 attack. Again, like one of those cards, like everyone had it when you little came in the Kaiba deck, and just so cool. And it's a card which we don't really see much after Duelist Kingdom, so it's, you know, really awesome. Again, having built the stack, throwing in all those really old school Kaiba cards, and again to the other characters as well, like Joey, we get to see those old school monsters that we don't see in later decks. So the effect monster list is short because not a big thing in Duelist Kingdom. Again, it was a lot of monsters, a lot of monster on monster battles. So we saw less spells and traps. We saw less effect monsters. They were there, but so Ancient Lamp, which was really played like a trap card in the anime, we have it as a monster, 900, 1400, and it's face down. It would be attacked. You can redirect the attack target, and then when it's face up on the field, you can special summon a Lodgin from your hand. So they did a pretty good job, I think, bringing this card to life in the TCG, doing what it needed to do from the anime. Although, granted, it protected Lodgin in the anime, and this special summons Lodgin, I think it's a fair enough trade-off. I'm not looking for anything, you know, really more to come out of it. Last up, Kaiba's handy, never goes anywhere without it, Lord of D. To protect his dragons, again, this is not a very dragon-heavy deck. The 3 blue eyes really are what he has, but help with the consistency, you know, to protect those blue eyes. And again, it's one of those things that Kaiba's always really had around, never given up on. So it's something we want to make sure its presence was felt in the deck, that you would see the Lord of Dragons that Kaiba always seemed to have. Alright, on to the spells. 2 D-Spell. So Kaiba used this on Yugi Swords of Revealing Light. There are, of course, other targets in Duelist Kingdom. We have a couple continuous spell cards in some of the decks. There's also definitely equip spells in a lot of the decks. So plenty of targets, and 2 D-Spells makes Kaiba, you know, pretty well off because he can really shut down, you know, a wide variety of opponents' cards. Next up is 2 Mesmeric Control. So again, another one of those cards we liked seeing in Kaiba's deck. Interestingly enough, I mean, it definitely can, you know, do some damage in Duelist Kingdom by virtue of the fact that your opponent cannot change any of the battle position of their monsters. And Duelist Kingdom, having lower life points, means those life points you lose can be oh so critical. So locking an opponent's monster in, you know, like into attack position can really set them up to take a good fall. Only one copy of Monster Reborn because it's Monster Reborn. 2 Polymerizations. A card we're never afraid to double up, especially when Kaiba's rocking 2 fusions. Gives him the chance now to make both of his fusion monsters, however unlikely it may be. Alright, next up in Kaiba's deck, 2 Stop Defense. So, helpful to get around defense position monsters. Could always lead to a lot of life point loss, and with 2,000 life points, it really cuts it in close. But it is what helps get advance, you know, the games forward, because again the problem was balancing life points, and that left direct attacks with only 1 attack per turn. Sometimes the games can go pretty quickly. Sometimes the games really drag on more than we see in later anime duels. and then 2 flute summon dragons. So we know with only 3 dragons, 2 flutes is a bit excessive. It pairs with the 2 Lord of Dragons. Again, it gives the Kaiba deck that consistency, that feel. So again, we can see a Lord of Dragons and a flute, even if it's just one Blue Eyes. Sometimes the point of the way we build decks is not always so much to make it, the most lethal deck. Otherwise, we would have just put in, 2s of other cards like Monster Born, but to make sure the deck really played and felt like a Kaiba deck. So you'll have more chances to draw Lord of Dragons and a flute, and then get that Blue Eyes out, so we can see Kaiba plays. Because that's ultimately what we really want to do with this channel. It's not so much the decks going head to head, but also seeing those classic plays. So having, increasing a lot of the copies of the deck to 2 increases the chances of that. And again, with the lack of cards you played, I mean, the deck feels a lot like Kaiba's deck. We're not bothered by the rampant amount of duplicates. Again, it maintains overall a nice 1-to-1 balance for the most part of everything being 2. But again, some cards were the exception to limit to 1, and wisely so, was Crush Card. Because especially in Duelist Kingdom, where you can summon those strong level 7, level 8 monsters, from the hand, and because of this format's reliance on that, and it being more of a Battle of the Behemoths type thing, rather than later in the anime where we see, it was still a lot of strong monsters, but not coming right off the bat, where you couldn't just summon Dark Magician and Blue Eyes do head to head. So Crush Card, something I doubt we'll ever really see more than 1 copy of, in any of our decks at least, because again, it's the main obtain a balance of the deck. So the 2 Saggies helps, so it's not just a 1-1 card you have to get. You have now a 2-to-1 ratio. But again, without Shrink or anything else like Kaiba has in his later decks, it is just those 2 targets really, unless Kaiba were to Monster Born something like Yugi's Karibo. But other than that, with Crush Card, we know what it does, is the classic most Kaiba, I think. Or really one of, because so many cards are classic Kaiba. I know, I keep saying classic Kaiba. Classic Kaiba. Hashtag classic Kaiba. And then continuing in the trap cards, Gift of the Mystic Elf. We kept this at 1 because of the life point gain. We did some testing, and they always ended up with this card. It was never just like 3 or 6 or 900. Of course, trying to optimize the card out. The life points were quite comparable, and the point of playing at 2000 was so that the games wouldn't drag on too much, but and as well be accurate to the anime. But the issue was that with Gift of the Mystic Elf, at more than 2, there was a potential for the Kaiba player to just go to gain too many life points to really see that damage done in this format for the most part. So the 1 copy, of course, because we did see him play it, but not so many that he's gaining, he's at 3,000-4,000 life points when the opponent is still around 2,000. So, again, we really tried to balance it because the Duelist Kingdom format proved a little bit challenging as far as trying to get the games to flow right, considering how the life points were, and even though life points are much lower than normal games, there's a lot more conditions on how damage is done. So, this was to try to bring a nice balance to it so that, again, it wasn't just that the life points were too out of hand. 2 copies of Negate Attack. We went with 2 because Kaiba had a lot of traps he always seemed to run, like Yugi's Mirror Force, save for Battle City. But Negate Attack was, it's a neutral trap, and that's why we like it so much, and that's why we paid lace into other people's decks sometimes. When we have to fill other people's decks, like Esperoba, for example. It's a neutral trap, meaning it doesn't inflict damage, it doesn't destroy monsters, unlike Magic Cylinder and Mirror Force, for example. So it just negates the attack and ends the battle phase. So again, it has an effect on your opponent that they don't like, but it doesn't do any life point damage or monster removal. So 2 is something that we're okay with. But at 1 copy, not, as dangerous of a card, but is Shadow Spell. Mostly because it immobilizes a monster and it does reduce their attack points. So it's like Spellbinding Circle. Actually, in the anime, Spellbinding Circle also reduced attack points. We didn't go that route with that card. We might as well just have used Shadow Spell, honestly. But we did one Shadow Spell so that Kaiba didn't have too many answers to opponent's monsters, like negate attacks and Shadow Spells to chain them up, reduce their attack points, and then come in swinging with his already super strong Blue Eyes White Dragons. But again, we like the deck. You know, if you have ratios you want to change, that's absolutely fine. Other people on YouTube we know have made this deck. We know we're definitely not the first doing this. This is how we did it, the way we build our deck. So if you have your own thoughts or changes, you know, have at it. But we're actually really happy with the way we crafted this deck. Alright, on to the fusion monsters. First up, Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. So despite this being our fourth Kaiba deck, again, in order we did Battle City, Awaken the Dragons, and Virtual World. So now coming all the way back to Duelist Kingdom, obviously all the cards in his deck debuted here. So Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, you know, despite all the times we've seen it played, you know, in our past duels on the channel and all the times on the anime, got its start in the Yugi versus Kaiba rematch that was outside of the Duelist Kingdom tournament itself, because Pegasus told Kaiba, go and beat Yugi, and then, you know, you can come and see me and we'll talk about, you know, giving back Mokuba's soul. So, Kaiba pulls out against Yugi in this, you know, amazing display of his power, and that he fused his 3 blue eyes, which was, you know, completely ridiculous that the strongest monster, you know, we had really, for the most part, blue eyes, got even stronger. Yugi found a clever way around this, using some weird fusion rules, and then Kaiba kind of cheated and won the duel. But, there it is, Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. And last but not least is the Rabid Horseman. So it only has 2,000 attack, making it tied with Sword Stalker and weaker by 200 points than Judge Man. But still, if you really in a pinch, I suppose you could make him, because he's so stronger than each of his pieces. And, you know, but besides the fact that it's just still a cool fusion, because it's Badlocks with, you know, a horse's lower half. So it's like a kind of got a centaur, minotaurish feel to it, being, you know, a combination of each of the halves. But, you know, again, one of those really cool cards that we don't really get to see anymore because Kaiba moves away from it in later seasons, but something that, you know, was a really cool monster that we'd love to play. So that's it. That is Kaiba's Duelist Kingdom deck. Stay tuned for more from our channel. More decks, more duels, always more content coming out from us. Wagio Anime Games out.